Hi, welcome back. We are going to go through uh, the second chapter of Slack and Wise's Culture and Technology in their discussion of progress. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reading from Neil Postman in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And you have one chapter to read from there. And what I'd like to try to do is put some of the ideas from Slack and Wise about progress in conversation with the information in the Postman chapter. So, to start, I want to walk through what this idea of progress is, which, if you remember from back last week, we talked about the received view of technology, the kind of dominant ideas and dominant myths or ideologies about technology that are prevalent through our society, and that there are four parts of that received view. The first one that Slack and Wise identify is progress. So we often consider the idea of progress as kind of inherent in ideas about technology, right? That technology moves us forward, that technology is a force for making our lives better, making society better, and that it in and of itself is kind of an example of progress, right? That we know that we have progressed by the technological developments that we've made. So, one thing that Slack and Wise ask us to consider is more technology always better, right? Is it always better for our world, for ourselves, if we have more technology? And you see, I included this image here, right, of people staring at their cell phones when they're all together, right? We see this and have probably experienced this ourselves, many, many times, right? You're around other humans, and yet the prevalence of technology, some argue, distracts us from each other and turns us towards our screens. Um, and then they also ask us to consider, is the world a better place than it used to be, right? As technology has developed, are we necessarily in all ways better off than we were? And one kind of striking example that should give us pause is the prevalence of climate change, right? As global warming is happening and threatens our ability to actually exist on this planet, we really have to consider, the role that technology and industrialization have played in making the globe uninhabitable. Right, so that makes us question this notion of progress. So Slack and Wise give a definition of progress, and they say that um, we usually mean in dictionary terms, right, that progress simply means to move forward. But if we take a larger cultural understanding of what we mean by progress, there's kind of an implication that we're not just moving forward, that we're actually moving towards something, right? That there's a goal, an end point, a sort of final, project that we are all working towards. And so when we talk about progress at the social level, right, it's this idea that society is getting closer and closer to that achievement. Um, and so what that does is it creates this notion that mankind has advanced from a primitive state, right, that we used to be less developed, now we are more developed, that we're continuing that advancement um, currently, and that in the future we will be at a better place than we are today. So all of this is what we might call utopian thinking, right? The idea that there's some ideal world where we've solved all of our problems, and Slack and Wise point out that technology, right, is often thought of as the means to achieve that utopian vision. So the goals of progress then are what we might call, or what Slack and Wise call as the quote-unquote good life, right? And so by that, we may mean either material betterment, right? We've acquired more things. We are maybe less impacted at a social level by poverty, by sort of the divisions in our world, right? That we all have enough to to kind of exist and have an enjoyable existence, right? And then the second way that we might talk about the good life is of moral betterment, right? That we're becoming better people, that we're kinder, that we are more just, that we are a more humane society, right? That we treat each other with greater dignity, and so if you think about the way that we talk about something like the civil rights movement, right? Where in the past people had more prejudices than they supposedly do today, and we became more aware, and now we have an understanding that we didn't have in the past. Of course, there's plenty going on that should make us question that narrative, right? And this is one of the points that Slack and Wise are trying to make, is that these aren't things that are essentially true, right? But rather, these are myths that our society tells ourselves. So then, we want to question then, is something new necessarily better, right? And so they use the example of email. We talk about email as an advancement over the post office, right? It's more efficient, it's faster. Um, uh, we can communicate more because of email. We can communicate at all hours because of email. But to be critical of this view that this is necessarily all for the better, we should think about what do we lose in that what we might think of as progress, right? So some people would say that too much electronic communication means that we never have time alone, right? We never have time to think. Maybe we've lost something of the art of the written letter, right? Or the meaning that you would get from receiving a letter, right? Because you knew that it took a lot of time and effort, whereas now communication is so instantaneous. So it loses some of the gravity that it once had. Those kinds of examples show us that whenever we hear this idea of progress, right, and progress as being inevitable, and that technology is bringing us that progress, we should be really skeptical and thoughtful of what exactly if those claims necessarily hold up.